Oh, friends, we're almost there. So I, like you, wear many hats, and I suspect some of the hats we wear have commonalities. I was thinking about this last night. I wear the hat as a daughter, as an oldest sibling in my family of origin. I wear a hat of being a wife, of being a person involved in my church, of a person who cares about my community and vulnerable families. I wear the hat as a community partner to our state's child welfare organization. I helped found an organization in 2012 called Every Child. We partner closely with our state's child welfare system to uplift state workers, uplift families and youth impacted in foster care in some really innovative ways. And currently, I'm really excited to develop and lead and pilot our state's first peer mentorship program that is operating in every county in the state of Oregon, where we pair warm, caring, experienced mentor foster parents with those who have been doing it 2 years or less to try to avoid some of those statistics that we've heard about today. But honestly, the role that has impacted my life the most, without question, is the role of being a parent. And while I'm aware that everyone in this room is not a parent, specifically a foster or adoptive parent, I want to share with you this afternoon what I often share with foster and adoptive families as to invite you into the reality of what it can look like and feel like to say yes to welcoming kids from hard places. And I hope that no matter what role you have, that you can find some relatability in what I share in my personal story. So I am very much aware as I take the stage and end our day that every single one of us has a story that is worthy of sharing. So I want to start by sharing these encouraging words from Frederick Buechner, who writes this: "My story is important, not because it is mine, but because if I tell it anything like right, the chances are you will recognize that in many ways it is yours. Maybe nothing is more important, you and I, than that we keep track of the stories of who we are and where we have come from and the people we have met along the way, because it is precisely through these stories and all of their particularities, as I have believed and often said, that God is known most powerfully and personally. And if this is true, it means that to lose track of our stories is to be profoundly impoverished, not only humanly, but also spiritually. I not only have my secrets, I am my secrets, and you are yours. And our secrets are human secrets, and our trusting each other enough to share them with one another has much to do with the secret of what it means to be human. Prior to welcoming children in our home, many of us in this room, myself included, may have been tempted to think about parenting more or less like a road trip. You're excited, you choose your destination, you talk with others about how they journeyed there, you plan out your route, you fill up your water bottles, you get some quintessential good road trip snacks, and you're off. And while there are never any guarantees with any child about the destination you're headed, no matter how our children come to us, everyone in this room knows that parenting children with the common denominators of loss and trauma put you on a parenting road less traveled. And just for kicks, I want to show you the first image that came up when I Googled parenting road less traveled. Doesn't this just, show the picture of what we're doing here? Oh my gosh. If your parenting adventure has been anything like mine, this often means you're navigating a road with hairpin turns, swerving over mountains and cliffs with sheer drop-offs, while multiple kids in the vehicle argue over the music station and then leave their snack wrappers littered everywhere. So let me say this. In this moment, if your parenthood feels like a serene drive down a country lane with your family just all happy to be together, quietly looking out the window, nobody's arguing, they're cleaning up their snack wrappers, then I am genuinely happy for you. I earnestly rejoice with you because I'm grateful for the times when the road is straight and calm, because this is a gift. But for most of us in this room, our parenting path through foster care and adoption has proceeded less like a predictable line and more like a scribble of high-speed crisscrossing freeways where sometimes we're speeding And other times, we're pulled off on the shoulder with our hazard lights blinking. And what I love about being in spaces and rooms like this, like the All-In Foster Care Summit, is that while the particulars of our stories may differ, the I get it factor in the room is strong because you're surrounded by others who have a very powerful connection, which is relatability. We don't have to explain to one another what the hard sometimes looks or feels like. And in my personal parenting road, here are a few that I've personally engaged, and I suspect you may have as well. And if you feel comfortable, you can even raise your hand if you can relate to this. Navigating overwhelmed systems with overburdened professionals. An alphabet soup of diagnoses before us. Feeling a hyper-vigilance in our bodies as we parent our kids. For me, signing in and out of the visitor's book at a residential treatment facility. Picking up a phone to hear an automated call from a correctional facility with a child's name I know and love inserted into the script, asking if I'll take the call. And struggling with the reality that the attention pie in my family is not divided evenly, hoping and praying that I have enough to pour into all of my kids, even my kids that aren't presenting as the neediest, knowing that they absolutely have a right to take up space. We also can celebrate when our kids, in ways big and small, show that they are courageous overcomers. And I think if we could all just swap stories, we would be able to identify the commonalities in our experience, but most importantly, we'd be able to identify the weightiness of emotions that come with those experiences. Joy, delight, exhilaration, and also disappointment, fear, exhaustion, grief, sometimes more than words can adequately express. And God is with us in the midst of this road less traveled parenting journey. After nearly 20 years of fostering and adopting, my husband Luke and I have 5 children, ranging in the age from 12 to 26, 3 of whom still live under the roof of my home. 3 out of my 5 children entered my life because I was first their foster mom. But before I share with you some stories, I want to go back about 4.5 decades when I was in first grade and share with you this. When I was a little girl, I remember thinking, yeah, okay, I want to be a mom, but I also want to wear high heels and carry around a combination lock briefcase, because in my mind, there was nothing more important than being trusted to carry around secret papers that needed a secret code to access. And while my briefcase dreams faded as I got older, by the time I met and married my husband Luke in the year 2000, I still knew I wanted to be a mom, but if you'd asked me what I wanted my family to look like, I would have been easy breezy about it and said something spiritual like, however God wants my family to look. If you'd asked me about my expectations, I would have claimed I didn't have any until years later, I got to the point in my parenting road where I could honestly say, yeah, I thought I didn't have any expectations, but I can tell you with 100% certainty that what is happening right here, right now, underneath the roof of this home, this was not it. This was not the vision of what I pictured when having my family, because juxtaposed against the reality of trauma, foster and adoptive parenting flicked down that first domino of unknown and unspoken, even to me, expectations of what my family would look like. Because on parenting roads like ours, the road sign we often see is this one: hill blocks view. We as foster and adoptive parents are driving on this road less traveled, and we often want to get over the hill and see the view for our family, for our child, for the sake of our whole family landscape. And if you're anything like me, you've seen this hill blocks view sign many times on your parenting journey. And maybe it's just me, but honestly, on some days, I feel like I can just peacefully embrace the mystery of it all. And on other days, it's much harder, and I internally kick and scream and sometimes have grief that comes out sideways, masked as anger, because I knew, God, this journey was going to be hard, but I honestly didn't know it was going to be this hard. And I just want to get a glimpse of the view and know it's going to be okay, because over the years, this road at times has affected my physical health, my mental health, and if I'm not careful, the relentlessness of this journey, of the things that are constantly changing or not changing, which can feel depressing, has affected my spiritual health, dimming my ability to see God's light and fading my ability to know that God unequivocally is for me and that God is steadfast and unwavering, and I am not. And truthfully, sometimes it's easier to believe this for others than it is for myself, because it can be hard to internalize truth when you're hyper-vigilant, because it seems like you're continually driving up an incline. Many of the relationships that have shaped me most in this life are ones I never would have had if my parenting road trip didn't include foster care and adoption. And I will tell you, in all of them, every single one of them, there have been many signs along the way that warn Hill blocks view. And I'd love to share with you 3 overall shaping stories, which are all told in my book, A Love-Stretched Life, which I was very grateful to the Summit for providing in the lobby. And it's important to me that you know that everyone that I'm about to talk with you about, I have full permission to share their name and to share how their story intersects with mine. So 12 years ago, Luke and I were fostering, but we were not on the DHS list to actively receive calls after hours, and yet we still received a call. It was for a baby needing to be picked up, quote, just for the weekend. Now raise your hand if you have a sneaking suspicion where this story may possibly be going. Anybody? You are correct. He's my 12-year-old son. Never left. Now, if the question had been, Jillana, there is a baby born at the hospital who is adorable and looks typical to the undiscerning eye. He won't sleep for more than 3 hours at a time for the first 5 years of his life. He will have a lifelong, irreversible, invisible brain disability, one that others will not see. Therefore, they will judge both you and him harshly because they will only see his high behavioral needs. And he will need a lifetime of intense, interdependent support and accommodations to rise to his highest level of capability. Will you adopt him? Now, that question would have been the question would have been the fodder for a lot of prayer and discernment. But the question before me that Friday afternoon in late September was, can you welcome a baby for the weekend? And with the DHS worker still muted on the phone, I actually walked next door to my neighbor's house where my husband, who is not a video gamer, was just enjoying, after a long week, playing a video game with our neighbor. He was playing NBA Jam. And with the DHS worker muted on the phone, I said, hey, babe, there's a baby at the hospital who needs a discharge. It would just be for 48 hours. And with his eyes on the screen and his hands on the controller, he said, yeah, I guess we could do that. So just in case you missed it, the story has a super spiritual beginning. I just want to point that out. So little did I know that holding this adorable baby at the hospital, when we would come to a named Charlie, who would tip down the dominoes of all my unnamed expectations for my family life. We adopted Charlie at age 2. That's my book. There he is. Seemingly a typical toddler with a few developmental delays, and by age 4, Charlie had grossly fallen behind every developmental milestone, and after a slew of other diagnoses, again, I have his permission to share this. I take this very seriously, but something that's not often understood. He was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. And I write in A Love-Stretched Life about rumbling with joy and grief. Joy because I've honestly celebrated many things with Charlie that I mistook previously as a low-level behavioral expectation with my other children. For example, if any of my other children came home in elementary school with a bus slip that said, great day, didn't swear like a sailor at peers and bus driver, I would have been like, well, you're darn right they didn't. That's not how we talk to each other in this home, right? But with my Charlie boy, we are plunged into just moment-by-moment celebration where I'm like, no swearing, high five, buddy, you're doing awesome, So it's just such a reframe. But here's the thing. Prior to parenting, and especially prior to parenting my Charlie, the unspoken internal monologue I had in my head, I would have known better to never speak this out loud, but in my head when I saw a child that was wildly dysregulated in public, might be to think something like, wow, Like, I wonder what his parents are or are not doing to have a child that talks and acts like that, swearing, hitting me. But thanks to my Charlie boy, that old judgmental dialogue has been wiped clean because that child is now my child, and I know what we've poured into him. And that verse about mercy triumphing over judgment has never appeared more technicolor to me than the years when I've been in public with Charlie and endured some significant dysregulation with him, trying to co-regulate with him. It's just taught me a lot. And so now I just strive to pass on that same grace to others when I see that their kids are having a hard time. Now at age 12, our ups and downs look really different than the first 5 years of his life when he was on a newborn sleep schedule and I was getting up with him every 3 hours. But I will honestly share with you this parenting road has been hard since the beginning, and it's been hard most days on a daily basis for over a decade. His needs are dynamic, and his in utero experience affects every moment of his daily existence and ours. And maybe you're sitting here thinking, Jillana, maybe the hill blocks the view for the future, but I can't even think about the future because right now I am suffering, my child is suffering, and the view of what daily life looks like is not the view of a family operating in health. So the sign on my parenting drive is, I see the view. I don't like the path. I want a new sign. And if you feel that way, and I surmise many of us in the room who have engaged with children from hard places feel, you are certainly not alone. Sometimes the relentlessness of parenthood makes it easy for us to forget the truth that just like God is for our children who have been through so much, God is for us too as we parent and advocate for our children on this road less traveled. Sometimes when coming up with my own words to pray feels like too much, I will write verses or quotes or prayers, and I will put them in places where I know I will see them throughout the day. The dashboard of my minivan, the windowsill where I do the dishes, my bathroom mirror. And one of them that I have had written down many of times is this: we must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one we have waiting for us. And sometimes all I can do is take a deep breath and hold out my palms and say, God, there are a lot of people who are hurting right now, not just kind of theoretically somewhere out there, but like right here, underneath the roof of this house right now. And you are for all of us. Psalm 56:8 says, you keep track of all my sorrows. You've collected all my tears in your bottle. You've recorded each one in your book. 15 years ago, I was fostering a 6-month-old baby boy named Micah as I walked into juvenile court. I hadn't met Micah's mother. She had been on the run, and I was told that she had just been located by the Department of Human Services and would be at court. I'd never had the opportunity to engage with a child welfare-involved parent before, and on my way out the door, just on a whim, I grabbed an 8x10 photograph that I'd had taken of her baby that was sitting atop my piano. And when I saw her at court disheveled, I introduced myself and I said, hi, are you Jennifer? I'm Jillana. I'm your son's foster mom. And I handed her the photograph. And what do you think her reaction was? She took it. She started crying. I found myself giving her a hug. And these words tumbled out of me that were unplanned. I wish I could be like, this was planned all along. That would be a lie. They were unplanned, but genuine and true, even though they were unexpected even to me. And I just said this: I am rooting for you. And I share the full story in A Love Stretched Life, but in the interest of time, here are the Cliff Notes versions of my 15-year relationship with Jennifer. I supervised 150 hours. That's the photograph that I handed her at court. I supervised 150 hours of visits between Jennifer and her baby. I saw firsthand, up close and personal, how much she loved her child. I slowly learned more of Jennifer's story and realized that if I'd walked a mile in her shoes, there's a darn good chance I might be standing exactly where she now stood. Month after month, year after year, in addition to the love, I also had a front row seat to how the pit of addiction and a toxic codependent relationship were like a rock around her neck, drowning her. At a particular emotional hairpin turn in the road where the Hill Block view sign was looming large, I passed a church kiosk with faded askew letters that said, as long as there's breath, there's hope. And I just remember staring wearily out the window and being like, God, That's cutesy. But do I really believe that? Does this apply to the mom? Jennifer's story was a story in the video before I came up here. Grew up in foster care, aged out, pregnant with 2 kids by the time she was 19. This is her 3rd child. This is where I'm entering the story. Grew up in 63 foster homes, full-blown addiction. Does this quote apply to a mother who's ultimately 4 for 4 with having all of her kids' child welfare involved? Is there really hope here? I have to share, it's really, really hard to hope when you're in survival mode. And that applies to anybody, regardless of the parenting equation that you're standing on. So in the midst of this pondering, I actually walked into this boutique in Portland, Oregon, where I live, that sells homemade goods, supporting artisans from around the world. And I was so taken with these letters that were nailed up on the wall. They were created in Haiti from a garbage dump. The H was made from a flattened can of Raid ant spray. So talk about taking beauty, making some beautiful art out of stuff that was literal garbage. And I just felt like, as this dragged on, like year 3 of our case, I just needed the hope. I just needed to see it. I needed to believe that like love always hopes the best for people no matter what. It's not self-serving. I am rooting for her. So with determination, well, I actually wanted to buy the letters, and then the practical part of me was like, oh, it's just too much. And then our case took a hairpin turn, as they often do, emotional roller coaster. And I walked back in the following week, and I just said to the lady, I'd like to purchase some hope. And she replied, just a minute, I'll go get it from the back. And when she came back, she's like, I'm so sorry, we're all out. And I was like, you're out? She's like, yes. I was like, you're out. So yes again. I was like, you are all out of hope. And she said yes. And I just kind of willed the water to not spill over in the corner of my eyes. And I was 2 steps out the door when she was like, I have a feeling this means something to you. I will sell you my display. And so I actually took those letters from the store that I just felt like I needed to hang on to as I was rooting so much for this baby's mother to get safe and healthy enough to be able to parent him again, and also loving him with my whole heart and just feeling the tension, feeling the privilege of being such a tension holder in this moment. And those letters hung up on my stairway, HOPE, until one of my boys years later was pretending he was fly fishing off the landing. And what's the letter that got knocked off? It was the P. And with lives like mine, I don't have the ability to go get a ladder and like nail up a letter. So our family walked up and down the stairwell to the not quite as inspirational word of ho for like a year, until we could nail it back up, transform it back into hope. But to continue my fast forward of the last 15 years, Jennifer and her first 2 kids lived with their biological father. We ended up adopting her 3rd child and fostering and returning her 4th child, who's the full biological brother of the child we adopted, not once, but twice, making us a relative provider as well. So 2 kids, 2 states. We live right on the border between Oregon and Washington. 3 separate court cases, and it has not been a cakewalk. And there have been many times where this hill has blocked the view, and yet God has used kinship with her in an incredibly transformative way in my life. And today we are 2 moms. This was taken almost 2 years ago. But today we are 2 moms in Portland, Oregon, raising 2 full biological brothers, 1 mile apart. She is a cherished family member to us. And when I say this, I don't say it like, oh, she's a family member, like you might say to be like nice and inclusive of somebody. I'm saying like we are family to her. She does not have anybody else. And Jennifer has taught me so much about what it looks like to make the tenacious choice to be clean and sober and to keep choosing that as she has for the last 8 years. I remember a caseworker saying, Jillana, I think her 4th child's going to go to adoption. She grew up in care. She's 4 for 4 with being child welfare involved. You just are on the cusp of adopting her 3rd child. I think that this is the way it's going. I can usually tell these things based on how big the file box is. And yet, as long as there's breath, there's hope. Jennifer and I, today, we speak to Oregon State caseworkers on the last day of their training. This is the last piece they get before they are released into their state offices, giving them a picture of what collaboration can look like when two imperfect moms lean towards one another and not away. And in the last year, Jennifer and I have been invited to share our unlikely story of collaboration on stages in Ohio, in Illinois, and 2 weeks ago in Arkansas. And when I compare and contrast, this is not a Disney version of becoming a united family. We have experienced every emotion under the sun, both with and towards one another. There have been a lot over the last 15 years, a lot of Hill Block's view signs, a lot of times where in the midst of her addiction, for my own emotional well-being and boundaries, we've had to be separated. But for the most part, our posture towards one another has been turned towards one another and not away. And I actually count it as quite a gift from God that I could not look into a crystal ball and see where the story was going. Because I would have been it was so outside of anything I'd ever seen or known or lived before that I wouldn't have even had the framework to understand it before living with it. I honestly think I would have felt really threatened by all I didn't understand at the time, and probably would have felt like, gosh, how does that threaten my standing as a mom if Jennifer's still involved in our life? So I honestly count the not knowing and just needing to put one ordinary foot in front of another ordinary foot to walk this path to see where our story is. It's really a story of grace upon grace. The last story I'll share is from over 2 decades ago of fostering. It's actually our very first child we welcomed in our door in early 2003. Luke and I were both very young, and having returned from a stint of living and working at an orphanage in Guatemala, we turned to one another and naively asked, "Where are the vulnerable children here?" And that led us straight to the doors of foster care. We initially were inquiring about just doing respite care, but in our early 20s and with exactly 0 parenting experience, so what could ever go wrong, the agency asked us to please consider not just long-term foster parenting, but joining their, feel free to laugh, therapeutic foster program. And we, feeling a tad flattered, gosh, maybe they see something in us that we don't even see in ourselves. Now, I know they were just really desperate for people, and motivated by our faith, we said yes. And that is when we knew that life had a seismic shift. We discovered in the first 48 hours that there is a huge difference between taking notes about trauma in a training class in a crisp journal in your neatest handwriting, right? And then seeing the messy reality lived out in a moment-by-moment reality underneath the roof of your home. Royal Storm lived with us for a full year. The full story is told in A Love Stretched Life, but the Cliff Notes version is that we transitioned him into a pre-adoptive home. That fell through. The decision was made, not our choice, to move him into a group home. We faithfully visited him, and then one day we showed up, and they just said, "He's been transferred. He's gone." This was in New York at the time where we fostered him. What? Transferred to whom? To where? And despite my best efforts, that was an abrupt ending to the connection to the boy that we raised for first grade and then faithfully visited every week for second grade until he was just gone. Hill Block's view. And one night, many, many, many years later, I got what I refer to as a Holy Spirit, Mama Bear sense of urgency that I needed to find Royal Storm that very moment and check in on him. And despite having photos of him up in our home and having his summer birthday circled on my calendar all these years, there had been 0 contact since he was in early elementary school and had been transferred. And now he was 19. With his unusual name, I found him. Boom. His Facebook photo showed red bloodshot eyes, holding a bottle of Hennessy, and flipping off the camera. And when I studied his face, I was sure it was him, even though I hadn't seen him since he was a little boy. But what do you say? How do you begin? So I wrote to Royal. Royal, you've been strongly on my mind. This is on Facebook. When I compare in a private message, when I compare that face and smile, even 13 years later, I totally believe it's you. My husband Luke and I fostered you when you were in first grade. We have pictures of you baking brownies, riding your first bike, taking a trip with us to California. We remember you as an amazing kid with a good heart who had so much adult stuff on his plate to deal with, and through no fault of your own and not through our choice, you moved on to a pre-adoptive home and then to a group home where we visited you before one day you were just gone. I literally showed up at different agencies and I hit dead ends. Nobody would give me any information. And I have no idea if you even remember us, but you have a special spot in my heart. Take good care, Royal. I wish you the best, Jillana. And I think those of us that have done this fostering journey know how quickly those abrupt goodbyes can be. And the response the next day was this. Now, Royal was the only child in our home. He called me Miss Jillana. I wouldn't have expected anything different. But his response the next morning was OMG with like 25 exclamation points. You're still ... my mom in all caps exclamation points. I've been searching for you my whole life. This feels like a dream. I've never forgotten about my family. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I feel like crying right now. Now, if life were a Hallmark movie, this is where the credits would roll. We would play some like uplifting melody. But as we are all aware in this room, life is not a Hallmark movie, and trauma is a beast whose roar can reverberate sometimes for a lifetime. So Royal Storm, whose childhood was more than tumultuous, was living out every predictable, dismal statistic associated with growing up in the system and not being attached to one caring adult throughout his life. Juvenile hall, to incarceration, to homelessness, to addiction, to trying to get a job with a felony, and then supporting Royal in his role as a first-time parent. It was against this backdrop that we reconnected and began to reclaim one another as family. And it's an ever unfolding story. There we are. But let me tell you this. Psalm 34:18 has never stood out to me more, which is the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The story I tell in my book is that Royal and his girlfriend and their kids actually took Amtrak 72 hours from Buffalo, New York, which is where I had fostered him, to Portland, Oregon, where we live now, to live a mile down the road from us, just to be close to us. I mean, admittedly, 1 year in first grade, it's not a lot to hang your hat on, but it was more than he had with anyone else, and we were willing to give it a go. And it has been the greatest joy of my life to be reconnected. I actually talked to him at lunch. He's back in New York now, but that's where my husband's family's from. We are back there all the time, every summer at least. We talk multiple times. A week and have for the last 7 years. His 3 kids call me Nana. And just like there has been with Charlie and with Jennifer, there have been really sharp curves and high hills. And yet, I've learned and am continually invited to relearn that just because I can't see the view, and fear and grief sometimes make those hills higher to peek over, doesn't mean that the God who knows us and sees us cannot see the view and promises to be with us no matter what. This is one of my favorite quotes that I've had on note cards throughout the years, and it is just this: trust in the slow work of God. Trust in the slow work of God. Again, if your parenting journey in this moment feels like a serene drive down a country lane, I rejoice with you when the times are smooth. But if you feel bone tired and crushed in spirit from the intensity of this parenting road trip, you are not alone and in the right place. And I do believe that the All-In Foster Care Summit represents a rest stop for you. And the organizations that are represented here represent help along the way. Where despite the heart-thumping conditions of travel, this is a place to remember that the Lord's presence is before you and behind you and beside you, all around you, in the morning, in the evening, in the coming and the going, in the weeping and rejoicing. God is with you. So let's keep our eyes on Jesus and claim the courage to be honest with God and with one another about the sometimes joyful, sometimes exhilarating, often messy, and always costly journey called foster and adoptive parenting. Knowing that when we are transparent Don't want to be crying right now, but that's just the vulnerability. It's been a hard week in our family. When we are transparent, we are in a better position to encourage one another when we are driving at an incline and see the sign, Hill Blocks View. So to close, I would just invite you, if you feel comfortable, you can stand, but I would invite you to just stretch out your arms or stretch out your hands if you feel comfortable to read a blessing. This blessing is taken from a book entitled The Lives We Actually Have, 100 Blessings for Imperfect Days. And this is a blessing for all of us in this room with the various roles we play engaging the vulnerable in our community. And it says this: God, I am troubled in spirit, and there doesn't seem to be an end to it. Show me the way toward peace. Thank you for the freedom that comes when I begin to admit how powerless I feel, how small amid the mountains of trouble. God, in this dark valley, let your light reach me, let your spirit comfort me. Help me understand how my body and mind and heart can be at rest, even here. Jesus said, I've told you these things that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Creator of heaven and earth and these mountains, who created even me, shelter me, live in me, breathe in me here, alongside all that is too vast to comprehend. You will never leave me. It's a fact. It's your greatest promise. Amen.